Hello, welcome to all of you who've dialed in for this hopefully useful and short presentation on CFA, common pitfalls, and of course how not to fall into those traps. My name is Simon Holohan. I'm actually the head of CFA exam training here at Fitch Learning. And of course I'm one of the program instructors. I teach all three levels, but I guess today, given the nature of the content, is more focused around level 1. The presentation is going to be tweaked regarding the regions of Asia Pac and Middle East and Europe. But if any of you happen to be logging in and watching it in the context of, say, the North American or South America, then you can find specific regional details on our website. Okay, so let's have a think about these common pitfalls. What I'd like to say at the outset is I've been helping people pass CFA for coming up to 20 years. I'm one of several full-time members of faculty here at Fitch Learning. And I think I'm based in London, and just in our London office, we have well over 100 years worth of experience amongst us for teaching CFA. So what you're going to see in this short session are kind of a pooling together of all of our ideas. So we sat down as a team and said, okay, if we were starting from scratch, what would we like to have known before starting CFA? So this is not just my pitfalls, this is really from the team which I work with. If you have any queries as we are talking, there is a chat box you can write in. I can see it here on my screen to the side, and hopefully I'll be able to address any questions as they happen. If not, you'll find at the end of this presentation there are contact details, and of course by all means contact so Cheryl in Asia Pac and Alfredo in the Middle East. So please contact those people, or again you can find other contact details through our website if you want to speak to someone in North America, say, or here in Europe. Okay, so CFA. What I'd say is, having spent many years preparing people for it, I don't think I've ever found anyone who hasn't passed because of a lack of intelligence. All right, so CFA is not an academically challenging qualification. It's a rigorous qualification, but generally speaking, people fail for reasons other than a lack of intelligence. In short, I guess the main issues of not being organised, disciplined and focused. Right? But we'll talk about those as we go through. Okay. Now, just before we get going, in case some of you have not heard of Fitch Learning before, there's a couple of just background slides about us and also about our online product called Cognition. I only mention that because I will be referring to it a little bit as we go through, and otherwise you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. So a little bit of background here about Fitch Learning. So we've been doing this for many, many years now. And we train well over 3,000 candidates every year all over the world. Okay? And we have a whole range of options, so whether you want classroom learning, pure online, combination of the two, if you want a full program that covers everything, or just a review program that just gets you sort of exam ready, we have a whole range of things. Right? We also have our online product, which I will briefly talk about, just to help you avoid these pitfalls, which we call Cognition. It's a fully adaptive, very, very kind of intelligent, I guess, for want of a better word, platform. And we'll talk about that as we go through. But Cognition is the online platform. And you'll see when we talk about it briefly, Cognition, as you imagine, is more than just a learning platform. In terms of what I mean by that is lots of learning platforms have videos on it and questions. And yes, by all means, this has loads of videos, loads of questions, I mean thousands of questions, probably in excess of 100 hours of videos, but it's a lot more than that. It's an intelligent learning platform. It tracks everything you do, and I mean everything you do. It records how many questions you answer. It records how long you took to answer it. It records what you got right and wrong, and it will benchmark you against everyone else. And so it will very quickly create a learning profile for you, and it will start to work out your strengths and weaknesses. And that, as we'll go through, is a vital way of helping you succeed in CFA. Anyway, so that's a little bit about cognition, but we will be touching on it as we go through. Okay, so let's have a think about these common pitfalls. So we came up with 10 of them. Could be 8, could be 12, who knows. And there's a bit of overlap, as you can imagine, between them. But hopefully, if you have a think about these and have a plan to deal with them, then hopefully it won't be a problem. And hopefully you can be one of the, 40% globally, roughly, that pass level 1. Okay. Okay, so let's go through these, and please, if you have any questions along the way, just type them in, and hopefully I can deal with them at that time. Okay, okay, so question 1, studying, number of hours. I'm sure you've been on the CFA website, or you've Googled how many hours it takes. The CFA recommend 250 to 300 hours of study. Is that enough for you? Do you need more or less? Well, clearly that will depend on your background. It will depend on what prior studies you've done, your level of experience. I think if you are someone relatively new to finance and perhaps has not done a finance relevant degree, then I think you'll need at least 300 hours. Whereas if you've got a finance degree or an economics degree and maybe a master's in finance, and perhaps you've been working for an investment bank or asset manager for 2 or 3 years, then you might need half of that. So it really does depend. All I can say is for me, I did level 1. I come from an economics background. I was an economist prior to teaching people for CFA. And I reckon I probably did about 160-ish hours for level 1. There's a lot of the content I was familiar with. But I must say for level 2, I did way in excess of 300, probably 350, 360 hours. So everyone's slightly different. It really depends on your prior knowledge. For level 1, I had a lot of overlap with my prior knowledge. Level 2, I had virtually none, well, a little bit. And then level 3 was somewhere in between. So I think if I look back over my 3 levels, I probably averaged about 250, 260. So I think the idea of 250 to 300 is a good idea. And I'd certainly recommend that you plan to say have 300 hours. And then try to, create that plan, break it down, work it out how many to do a week. But I would start with the assumption of about 300 hours. Okay. Now, of course, the quicker you start, the sooner, perhaps I should say you start, the more weeks you have to spread over that 300 hours. That said, I wouldn't recommend starting too early. I mean, if you're looking to do an exam, let's say for June next year, then I wouldn't start, let's say, September this year. I think that is just too long. You might start a little bit before the end of the year and get a little bit of studying done in December. But generally speaking, if you start, bang on the beginning of the new year in January, you should have plenty of time. I think starting too early, you can just lose momentum, lose a bit of passion. You get in the habit of just doing a few hours a week. And it's actually quite hard to ramp it up. So I think I would start January, and that allows you to keep the pace up. And we'll talk about the pace a bit later on. So go for about a 6-month period. Now, if you can't do 6 months, perhaps you're really busy in January or whatever, and you have to squeeze into 5 months or even 4 months or even 3 months, I've known people do it in. But of course, you still have to do the same kind of hours. So it just means you have to do more hours per week. So have a plan, sit down, think about, how many hours you can do a week. Now, bear in mind, most of us have got busy day jobs as well. So have a realistic discussion with yourself about how many hours you can do. And then from there, you can always work backwards. So if you think, right, you can do 10 hours a week, you're thinking, right, okay, there's my 300 hours, I'm looking at 30 weeks, you can then get a start date, okay? So just think about the amount of study to do. Now, clearly, don't waste time, yeah? And a lot of people do waste time. You might have a spare half hour, it could be sitting on a train or on a bus or whatever. Well, don't waste it. And again, the cognition platform, which I briefly mentioned, will help you do that. All of our videos, I should add, are broken down into bite-sized concepts. We call them atoms, right? But it really is micro-learning. And most of these micro videos are between, so I guess, 2 to 5 minutes. So if you've got 30 minutes spare, you've got time to watch 1, maybe 2 videos. After every video, there's a couple, 2 or 3 very focused questions that help you just understand that little bit of nugget of information. It's your little video, a couple of questions, there's that concept in your brain. You could do a second one. So you could easily make use of small pockets of time. And I think that's the attraction and the efficiency behind cognition. But anyway, but please don't waste your time. You need to make sure that every spare moment you are studying. Because if you're not, other people will be. And ultimately, this is a relatively competitive exam. Although it's not marked against a curve, you still are effectively competing with everyone else worldwide. So okay, there's the first pitfall. Go into it with your eyes open and think, right, 300 hours-ish, and then work out your study plan. I mentioned a study plan, so very, very important. You have to work it out, and then clearly you have to stick to it. It's no good having a plan that you then forget about. Now again, if you're a little bit rubbish at sticking to a plan, I speak from experience myself, then again, if you want the online product Cognition, will do one for you. It can work out your own study plan, it can send you prompts, it can remind you when you are overdue a certain task. It can kind of help you, be that little voice on your shoulder saying you should have done some questions on quants by now, whatever. So again, we do have this very, very integrated, essential study plan that's built into Cognition, or you can do it yourself, but it's absolutely imperative you have a study plan. So that should link into your 300 hours. Work it out. When are you going to study? Is it weekends? Is it evenings? Is it before work, after work? Have a plan and stick to it. Okay, the curriculum, the syllabus. It's big. Level 1 is really quite broad. Okay, you don't have to know much in terms of detail, but the breadth is really huge. It's probably not far off like an undergrad in finance. It's really, really broad. Maybe equivalent to the first and a bit of the second year if you're doing an undergraduate in finance. So it's very, very broad, very broad. People always try and think, okay, well, what's going to come up in the exam? Well, no one knows. I don't know. Who knows? No one knows. So really, it's very dangerous if you decide to guess what's going to come up and you decide to only learn bits of the curriculum and ignore the rest of it. All right, it's very, very dangerous. The exam, maybe not every sitting, but over a period of years, I can assure you it will test all 4 corners of the curriculum. And so if you go into it thinking, I'm going to forget that area there, well, it's a toss of a coin. You might be lucky, and in your particular sitting, they don't test that little area, or they might do. So I think it's important that you should at least aim to cover the whole curriculum, or at least as much of it as possible. Right? Now, again, in order to help you with that, our Cognition platform will, as I said, monitor you. It'll keep a record of everything you've done. And if it starts to detect that you are avoiding certain questions linked to a certain part of the curriculum, guess what? It will divert those questions to you. So when you start to do a test and it gives you a sample from a particular reading, it's going to skew that sample to areas which you haven't really looked at. So the Cognition platform is very good actually at making sure you do cover the whole curriculum. And it's important you do, I said, because you really can't guess what's going to come up. All right? So try and aim for as much of it as you can. Okay, no one has to do 100%, but I think it's when people just try and learn half of it and think, oh, well, that'll be fine. It won't be. All right? So try and cover as much as you can. Now, ethics, probably the dullest topic, if I'm honest. It's really, it's great if you can't sleep at night. Start reading it, and after a couple of pages, you'll be fast asleep. So it's not the most exciting area, I'm afraid. And it's quite difficult, it's quite frustrating, because ethics is never black and white. If it was, we wouldn't need to have compliance officers in banks. Ethics is always about judgment, it's always about shades of grey, but unfortunately you are doing a multiple choice exam. So you have to go for a black and white answer. So it can be quite frustrating. Yeah, we get a lot of comments from candidates saying, oh, but why isn't it B? You know, we may have said the answer is A, and they say, oh, but if this happened, then surely it's B. And that's the nature of ethics. You know, if, you get a different answer. So it's very frustrating, and it can be a little boring. But you can't neglect it. Right? It's incredible, actually, when I talk to candidates who perhaps haven't passed, and this is true of all 3 levels, any level, and I ask them, what did you score in ethics? 9 times out of 10, if people haven't passed level, I ask them for ethics score, and they did underperformed, below 70, maybe even below 50%. Yeah. And that is absolutely the key here. Because as you may well know, if you don't, it's really important that if you are a borderline candidate, if you're near that passing score but not quite over it, they'll determine whether you pass or fail purely on your ethics score. So you really have to focus on ethics for that reason. Second reason, of course, is the topic weighting. It's big, 15%. You know, for level 1 this is. Only a financial reporting and analysis is higher than 15%. So it's your second highest topic. Right? So it's really, really important you focus on it. Now, how you do that very much depends on your style of learning. To me, I used to prefer a little and often. So I'm a commuter, so I have a train journey at the beginning and at the end of every day. It's about 30 minutes where I can sit down. So for me, I use that time for ethics. And in that 30 minutes, I could read one of the ethical standards, we call the standards of practice. And the CFA curriculum is by far the best resource here, by far. And it's broken down very nicely. You have the rule, the standard, followed by a little bit of detail to help you understand how to apply that standard. A little bit of detail about what you should do to ensure you don't break that standard, so compliance recommendations. And then the best part is they have anywhere sort of 4 to a dozen little case studies, little paragraphs, little scenarios showing you when that standard has been broken, has not been broken, and a little discussion afterwards. You can do all of that for one standard easy in about 20 minutes. So that was my commute. Every day I read one standard in the morning and one standard in the afternoon, coming home. I did that every day. So after, I forget how long, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, whatever, I'd read all of the CFA standards. And then I went back and did it again. So I was kind of on a continuous loop. And so by the time I did hit the exam, I'd read the standards probably 4 times. And then I did loads of exam questions, got the area covered. So that was my approach. Other people swear that cramming is the best. They think it's such a dull area. It's an area which doesn't really require a lot of understanding. It's quite a lot of memory work, and so they think cramming works best. So I've known people, they simply say, right, near the exam, I'm going to spend 4 or 5 days just reading and doing ethics questions. And I don't know which one's going to work for you. I know it worked for me at all 3 levels. I did the little and often, but I know other people who have done the cramming. But the important thing is you've got to make sure that you spend enough time here. It's 15%, and say if you're borderline, they'll decide your progress on ethics. So many people, unfortunately, fall into this trap. They ignore ethics. They think it's common sense. It's not. All right, some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. You really have to do some studying. So really be very careful about ethics. Yeah. Okay, exam practice. Obvious, I guess, as a potential pitfall. You've got to get used to multiple choice questions. And say in some topics they work very well. You know, the calculation type things, they're looking for a number, it's there, you can say fine, the answer's B. The more discursive aspects can be a bit trickier. So the important thing is to do as many questions as you can, and also variety of questions. Right? So lots of different types of questions. Now again, the online product Cognition, I said before, will track you. And it will keep a record as to what questions you've covered and what types of questions you have done well on. So it'll help you move you onto areas that you're a little bit weaker on. Also, you've got to be able to do the proper full-on exam experience. Right? So the CFA exam, remember, is quite a stressful situation. There's maybe lots of people doing it with you, depending on where you go. It could be anywhere from tens of people to thousands of people, depends on what centre you go for. And it's 2 3-hour papers. So it's really important you prepare for that. And sitting an exam for 6 hours is tiring. It's really tiring. You will, although they will have access to water fountains, you're not allowed to eat or drink at your exam desk. So if you want to have a glass of water, you have to leave, you have to put your hand up, a proctor has to escort you or give you permission to leave your desk. You walk over to a water fountain, have something to drink. It takes time. And so the reality is that people don't stay that hydrated, and therefore that makes it really tiring. Right? And now you can get used to it. You can build up to that. You can train your body to cope by being a little bit dehydrated. But you have to do that. You have to practice a long exam. Again, so many people fall for the trap where they do 10 questions, then they mark it, then go and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, come back, do another 10. That's not exam practice. If you've got to prepare for a 6-hour exam, you've got to get used to sitting there at least for 3 hours. So okay, you'll be doing this as you get nearer to the main day, but you've got to just get used to the idea of having this long block of time, a lot of concentration, where you can't get up and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and you probably won't even be able to drink that much. So, so having a proper mock exam is very important. And again, at Fitch Learning, we will organise these proctored mocks, which will very much replicate the real thing to help you get through the exam. The pace, I mentioned that earlier. Right? So you've got that 300 hours-ish. You've got to, don't spread it over too long. There's no point doing it over a year. It's equally no point trying to do it over 2 weeks. So you've got to have a sensible study program, and you've got to get that pace right. Ideally, you want to start reasonably slow and build up. But you've got to be mindful that we are all human. And if you've got a busy job anyway, you're already working 5 days a week, say, you've got maybe family commitments to think about, and you've got study on top of that, it can easily get too much. So just try and be mindful. Maybe build into your study plan a break. It could just be a weekend. Just have a weekend off where you just chill out with your family and friends. But you might need that. So the sooner you can start, then you can build into your study plan some breaks. Maybe just before the exam. See if you can take a week off work before the exam. A lot of people do. I did, and I honestly say I don't think I would have passed the 3 levels if I hadn't taken that week off. Because in that last week, you can just do mock paper, mock paper, mock paper, mock paper. You can really build some momentum up to the real exam. Obviously, don't overload that last week. You don't want to be doing a 100-hour week, because come the exam, you'll be extremely tired and underperform. But trying to take that week off is quite important, which again will come into another point we'll mention in a moment about talking to your peer group. So organising your work. Maybe seeing if your team will allow you, to have that week off. It might mean someone has to move a holiday, but try and have that week off if you can. So the key is to be ready for the exam. There's no point being exam ready a month before, no point being exam ready a month after. You've got to get ready for the day. So a bit like anything, like a sports event, you've got to build up to it, build up to it. If you're going to run a marathon, they have a very structured plan to increase your hours of, or your distance, I should say, per week. It's the same thing with CFA. You want to build up, build up, build up, but the objective is to be ready for that exam on that day, not before, not after. So think about the pace. Don't overdo it too soon, because you'll simply get tired and disillusioned. But equally, obviously, don't go too slow. The calculator. You only really have one. Okay, you have two choices: the HP and the Texas. Probably 99% of candidates use the Texas because it's cheaper and more intuitive, and I think it's the better calculator. But the important thing is you have to know how to use it. It's no point using your favourite Casio that you used from school and college. You're not allowed to use it. Right? So you have to use one of two prescribed calculators: the HP 12C or the Texas BA Instruments BA2+. Right? The Texas one is about a third of the price, and it has a few more relevant functions for us for CFA. So I thoroughly recommend the Texas Instruments one. Probably recommend getting two of them. A as a backup. I mean, these are cheap electrical instruments. I have no idea what the component cost is, but it's probably at most a couple of dollars. So you are trusting a lot of your life and study time to a tool that might be worth a couple of dollars in terms of its component costs. So I would get a second one. Also, every time I've done a CFA exam and I've walked into the exam testing centre, I've always heard quite a few people drop their calculator. Now, if you drop one of these calculators on a concrete floor, goodbye calculator. So again, I would probably recommend getting a couple of them. Right? If you only have one, that's fine. The batteries last forever. So you could just get away with one. It'll be fine for all through CFA. I still use the one that I had when I did level 1, long time ago now. I won't say how long, but dinosaurs had just died out, but a long time ago, and the battery's still fine. So now, get the calculator, and really you have to use it every single day. Start to use it in your work. So come the exam, it becomes second nature. All right? So make sure you use the calculator. There are some really, really fantastic shortcuts and features in it where you can work out things like IRRs, you can work out an amortization table, you can convert between a nominal interest rate and an effective or compound rate. So really make sure you are all over this calculator. If you need any help, there's a little calculator guide and a link here. But it's important that you ditch any other calculator you have and use this one here. Okay. Now, I mentioned a peer group. This was actually one of my suggestions I came up with, the support, because it was vital that you had support from your peer group. If you work for an investment bank, like I used to do, it's a little pressure on you to put in the hours. And if you start to leave your desk at 5 o'clock, people will look at their watches, look at you and thinking, really, are you part-time or something? So having a discussion with the rest of your team is important. And let them know. So if you're doing like an evening class, let them know that on a Tuesday and Thursday, when you leave at 5 o'clock, it's not because you're going home, it's because you've got to travel to another place to then do a 2.5 or 3 hour evening program. And having that information shared stops that awkward kind of looking at watches, comments, etc. Talk to your line manager, talk to your boss. Make sure they know that you are doing something which will develop you and hopefully make you a more productive employee as well. And hopefully that's something that your firm will buy into and support. And that might mean that they perhaps don't overload you so much with work. Make sure the people around you know when the exam is. Again, try and rearrange people's holidays perhaps so you can take that week off before. So I think it's really important that you discuss this with your peer group, discuss it with your partner. Again, I don't think I could have passed CFA without the support from my wife. Because when I'm studying at the weekends, well, who's looking after the kids? So so she had to take her role there. So having the people around you know what you're doing and support you is very important. Maybe having a study group, if there's someone you know nearby who's studying with you, will help. It helps you just to bounce off ideas. It helps to discuss things. I used to love it when I'd call up my friend. It was two of us studying. She worked for a different investment bank, but we studied together. And just calling her up and saying, listen, I'm really struggling on how to, whatever, price a swap. Just hearing her say, oh yeah, me too. just suddenly takes the pressure off, thinking, okay, it's not just me being stupid. So having a discussion, having a study group is very important. Now, if you don't have a study group, and if you want to talk and discuss something, bounce some ideas, of course we do have a help desk function which you can access through Cognition. We have CFA instructors all over the world, so there's a good chance to be someone nearby, someone at least in your time zone where you can have a chat with. But definitely talk to your fellow peers in your bank, your firm, etc. Cramming, well, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, the study plan. You know, you've got to think of that 300 hours, you know, and you get so many myths out there, rumours, oh, I did CFA in 1 week or 2 weeks. There may be the odd person, but I don't really believe that. So I think you have to have a plan. That's what we mentioned at the beginning. It has to be a sensible plan. You have to pace it appropriately. If you try and cram it all in at the last minute, I just don't think it's going to work. If you do pass, it will not give you a good foundation for level 2. So it means you're more likely to fail level 2. A lot of level 1 is assumed and needed for levels 2 and 3. So I would try not to cram wherever possible. Right? Obviously, don't learn the answers. There are no mock exams in terms of past papers, I should say, that are in the public domain. The CFA Institute has never published an actual exam paper for level 1. They used to publish the written parts for level 2 and level 3. Now only level 3 has a written paper, so that gets published. But in terms of multiple choice questions, they've never published an actual past paper. No. So there are no such thing as past papers. So there's no point trying to learn answers in that respect there. All right? So when you're doing questions from Cognition, maybe questions from the CFA Institute themselves. Yeah. Any questions you get will just be example questions. Right? So the CFA Institute has some questions on their website. They have questions at the back of the curriculum readings. You know, we have questions. They're all worth doing, absolutely. But the important thing is you're doing them to learn a concept, to learn a fact. You're not doing it to try and memorize the answer, because it's not from an actual paper in that respect. No. As I said before, Cognition will keep a track of your questions. And if you did try and skip out some, it's very good at knowing that, and it will say, look, you haven't covered this area here, here's some questions. So it kind of keeps you covering that whole curriculum. Right? The exam day I mentioned earlier is a 6 hour. Well, it's longer than 6 hours, because if you are going to a large testing centre, then it's a bit like going to an airport. You don't just rock up 5 minutes before the plane's due to leave. It takes time to go through security and check in. Same thing with the big centres. Depending on where you go, there are some centres out there where, say, there'll be several thousand candidates. And all those people have to be signed in. They have to have their possessions and coats, etc. checked. You have to make sure you clear your calculator, and there's something hidden in the calculator. So you have to go through sort of security type checks. It takes time. So if you've got a 9 o'clock start for your exam, you'll have to be queuing to get into the centre at about 8 o'clock. If you leave it too much later, there's a good chance you won't get in. And that happened to several candidates I knew this year in London. They started to queue at about 20 past 8. And at 8:30, the proctor basically shut the door, and those who hadn't got in by 8:30 had to wait until they'd started the exam. So they missed out a bit of time for the exam. So it's a long day, so pretty much you should be in at your seat by 8, maybe 8:15. Exam is from 9 to 12. You then get released. It takes a bit of time to collect scripts and release people. So you might be out of the hall by 12:15, yeah. All right. Your afternoon exam starts at 2, but you've got to go through the same process of registering and security checks. So realistically, you'll be sat down for the afternoon at about 1 o'clock. So you'll have about 45-minute break. It's not long. So it's a very, very tiring day. So, so get used to that pressure of the day. So try and do a proctored exam if you can. Right. Now, on the actual exam day, you'll get used to the idea that some questions are easy, some are hard, some are impossible, some you've got no idea about, and that's just the nature of the exam. Now, as you probably know, with this CFA, they lump questions by topic, so you don't get all the topics mixed up. So we'll start off with ethics, and find the first, 18 or whatever questions on ethics. Then it will be quants, and then economics, and then financial report analysis. So it's broken into sections. So what I'd recommend you do on the day is start with your strongest topic. So for me, as a former economist, guess what? I went to economics first of all. I did economics, quants, fixed income. They were my first three. Then I went to the very back of the paper and did portfolio management. Then I did ethics, and so I kind of jumped around, but I tried to do my strongest topics, the ones which I had most chance of scoring highly. I did at the beginning. So A, I didn't run out of time on those strong topics, and B, I didn't make silly mistakes because I was getting tired. So I left my worst topics to the end of the paper, and that's fair enough. So if I'm going to get a question wrong because I'm losing concentration because I'm tired, I'd rather get a question wrong where there's a good chance I would have got it wrong anyway than get a question wrong which I otherwise would have got correct. So I just do my best topics first. Okay. Also think about logistics. Again, depends on where you go and where you're being tested, but make sure you know how to get to the test centre. Some are easier to get to, some are not. And I guess the main thing to flag up is nearer the time, go on the CFA website and look at the exam test centre policies. Very important. Read that near the time, and that tells you all the things you can and cannot do on the day. And you need to follow that policy exactly. Any deviation, there's a chance that you will have your result investigated and possibly ripped up. So please, nearer the time, just make sure you follow those rules. But the day is pressurized, but the point is it is for everyone. But the more you can prepare for it, the better you've got. Right? Now, in terms of just some classroom options, we have some information here. So this is aimed at Middle East and Asia Pac. If any of you are watching it from elsewhere in the world, then please go onto our website where you'll find other regional courses. But we have a range of instruction, classes, online, full programs, review programs. So please have a look at the website. And so if you have any comments or questions, Cheryl and Alfredo here will be able to help you. I'm just going to look at the monitor to see what questions have come in along the way. So we have a question here about, is there any way to take mock tests online? Yeah, good question. Yes, indeed. So cognition, you can take a mock test online. It's still good, though, to try and do it if you can as a proctored, invigilated, if you want to use that word, experience to get used to it. But absolutely, we do have our mock tests which are online, timed in that respect there. So yes, you can do that. Can't see any other questions at this point here. But say if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to Cheryl and Alfredo, and if they can't help you, they'll forward it on to myself and I will get back to you. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope this has been useful, and good luck with your CFA studies.